the start of the NFL season is just around the corner, which means it's time for our first power rankings video of the season. I've been waiting to do this video since last year. I kind of hopped into it halfway through. It was super fun. I'm going to continue this in the form of weekly top 10s for the rest of the season. But as for the start of the season, we're going to get everything out there for every team in a full-length video. So let's get right into it and get started at the bottom. We're going to start at the bottom, and our last place team, the only team in the tanking tier, is going to be the New Orleans Saints. Probably shouldn't come as a surprise to many of you, but they're in a total rebuild. Of all the teams in the NFL this season, they are definitely the most likely to have the worst QB play by a large margin. Spencer Rattler was named the starter in the QB battle over rookie Tyler Shuck, who's actually quite old. He's like 25 or 26, so he's like a veteran, and he still could not beat out Spencer Rattler. And they also decided to take him over Shedeur Sanders, so that's going to be a narrative we follow this year. But like I said, Rattler and Shuck, they have some talent, but it just seems like the floor is just non-existent, especially when you see like what they're working with. The team is in cap hell, and they're pretty much restarting on defense, and they got Jonathan Gannon to help them with that. I'm really not a huge fan of that. And then they do have a new head coach, Kellen Moore, who's a great offensive mind, and they hope that they can establish that offensive identity, beginning with his scheme. In the first round, they took tackle Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas. Like I said, they passed on Shedeur and Jackson Dart and opted to kind of reconstruct the whole offense first, which isn't a bad philosophy. And it's a good sign for the long run that they're going to make the proper decisions to move forward and really build up this team. They do have Olave and Shaheed at wide receiver, who are good, injury prone, but good. But like I said, they missed significant time, so you probably should add wide receiver depth too. And, maybe they can surprise us with a couple wins, but I really don't see them climbing much higher than maybe out of the rebuilding tier, which is going to be our next tier. And let's get right into that. And our first team in the rebuilding tier is the Cleveland Browns. Now, this team is in very, very dangerous, treacherous waters because they could fall into this tanking tier very easily. They have many quarterbacks on the roster. Shedeur Sanders, Dylan Gabriel, both drafted this year. Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett got traded. So it's looking like it's going to be down to those three. But it hasn't looked too hot in the preseason. They're still sort of recovering as an organization from the Deshaun Watson contract. And, Shedeur Sanders maybe could be what gets them out of that. Maybe he can play well this year if they actually play him with the starters and give him a real shot. And, perhaps that can help them kind of move on from that whole situation. He's clearly the best combination of talent and youth that they have in that QB room, and I think he will be their guy by the end of the year. Any crazy sort of PR stunts that might get pulled off there. But another thing is this team has lost their offensive identity over the past few years, with the run game especially, that Kevin Stefanski needs to set up these, passing concepts. And they drafted Quinshon Judkins in the second round, really talented running back, but he might miss this entire season on the commissioner's exempt list. He got into a pretty messy situation that actually got dropped involving a domestic violence situation. But like I said, it got dropped, but the NFL will do their own investigation. So, we're going to have to see what happens there. But behind him, it's another rookie in Dylan Sampson who could step up and be pretty good. But other than that, it's Jerome Ford. And, I like him as a person and player, but he really doesn't have all that high of a ceiling as a running back, and definitely is not going to really elevate past what this offensive line gives him. Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman are fine wide receivers, but nowhere near game changers, and it's going to struggle to make up for the lack of the run game. The pass pro is going to be terrible if this line suffers any injuries. Defensively, they do have Myles Garrett. He's back. He's under contract, and there is talent at other positions like in the secondary and across the defensive line, but with the injuries, the terrible offense, there's too much fragility to even be that excited about the defense, I would say, as well. So despite the adversity, unlike the Saints, the Browns, at least, I feel, do know who their future quarterback is, and they can kind of focus on building around that. And, I just think they're in better position to win games this year because they might actually have a quarterback who can get that done for them. the Saints might even be a slightly better roster. I don't know. They're both pretty bad, but ultimately, I think the quarterback is going to make a difference there. Up next, we have the New York Jets. This team, I actually had one spot ahead of this prior, but ultimately I ended up moving them down. It's just really don't like what we're hearing out of training camp. The preseason didn't look too good or anything. But they're an interesting team. They're the only team in this tier with both a new head coach and new quarterback. So that's all that opens up a lot of room for volatility and, exceeding our expectations. But they still retained a lot of their pieces on the defense and some of the running elements on offense to pair with Justin Fields. And this team has a decent shot at actually having like a well-formed identity right off the bat. They have a new head coach, Aaron Glenn, from the Lions. He was their defensive coordinator, and he hopes to reinforce that mindset similar to what they had there in Detroit, of that hard-nosed discipline and really smart football team that just makes everything really hard to do on offense. And then obviously running the ball when they're on offense is going to complement chewing up the clock and things of that nature. I think the defense will be a quality unit. However, I believe as exciting as Justin Fields is, he will struggle when they need consistency in the passing game to make the most out of the defensive performances. So, when they're trying to come back, maybe they're in a close game and the defense keeps getting stops, but they just can't score. That's kind of how I see this season going. So, like I said, hence when they're winning, the game script and Fields with Brees and the run game and Braylon Allen, they can run the ball and play complementary football. But when they aren't, I don't think Malachi Corley, actually they just cut him. They don't have a wide receiver too, essentially, besides Garrett Wilson. And that might not be the worst thing since Justin Fields has trouble coming off of his first read. And it's going to be even harder with his former college buddy and Garrett Wilson. But ultimately, I'm just really not fired up about this passing game. I think it's going to be just as bad as the Browns passing game, the Saints passing game. And if you have a weakness that's that bad, it's just going to drag you down the whole season. Coming up next, our number 29 team, the Tennessee Titans. Now, this team has the best quarterback of any of the 4 teams we've listed so far. And that's not really saying much. But Cam Ward really does have a lot of potential. He gets Brian Callahan, and we got a glimpse. Excuse me. After essentially tanking with Will Levis and Mason Rudolph last year, that's kind of like what the Saints are doing this year with Tyler Shuck and Spencer Rattler. They were awarded the first overall pick and able to select Cam Ward. So last year's over, being one of the worst teams in the league, trying to tank, all that is over. And they have fully committed and kind of handed over the reins to Cam Ward. You already hear about how he's, sort of changing the culture there with his work ethic, with how hard he works, how he's always there early at 5 a.m., in the film room. You love to hear these types of things, but there is a whole rest of the football team to talk about. And the offensive line is still pretty scary. And although Cam Ward is an excellent play extender, it's really going to put a lot of pressure on him to basically make the offense, make all the plays, extend them, make plays happen when there's nothing there. And we saw Jaden Daniels do this last year with the Commanders, a team we thought was just in a total rebuild. So you might think, hey, maybe the Titans can do it too, but they don't have a Terry McLaurin here in Tennessee. I get Calvin Ridley has a good amount of potential and can be a pseudo alpha wide receiver, but Terry McLaurin I think is much better than Calvin Ridley. Okay, so, and I think we saw that by the way he performed in the years prior to Daniels getting there. So there's that. But defensively, this team was also horrible last year, and one can only hope some improved offensive play can kind of help them with that too. But they just lack a lot of talent. And I mean, we could still see a promising year one where a few wins are earned by this team and they stay competitive in games. And, maybe Cam Ward looks really good. But ultimately, I think it's clear that they're just sort of outclassed talent-wise on, especially the trenches. Like, if you're outclassed in the trenches, like, it's really, really hard for you to get up there. I mean, Joe Burrow with that offensive line was sort of able to find a lot of success in that second year, but ultimately, even still, that bit him in the ass in the end. So Titans are at 29, and now we get to start our next tier, the volatile tier. This tier is for teams that really have like a wide range of outcomes because of either there's a lot new or there are young, very important players that are sort of in the process of developing, improving, and showing what they are. So that's what this tier is all about. And to start things off, we got the Carolina Panthers. This team is super exciting. Everyone was all about the Bryce Young comeback last year, sort of saved himself from his career dying. And this Panthers team overall just really encapsulates this sort of volatile tier because the offense has been addressed for the past 2 seasons, and a lot of people are really excited for what that's going to bring this year. The offensive line has been, it was good last year. It was pretty solid, and now they have another year of chemistry built up with that. Chuba Hubbard for the run game. They drafted Trevor Etienne Jr., I think it's Jr., and he is going to be the receiving back offensively with the weapons. They have a first-round pick in Teteroa McMillan. He does not want to be called Tet. And he is going to be their alpha wide receiver. And that pushes Xavier Legette down to be the X wide receiver, probably a better role for him. And then Jalen Coker can play in the slot, I would say. They have Jatavion Sanders at tight end. So all this young talent on the offense. You got Dave Canales, their head coach, offensive mind, calling plays. I like all of that. But the defense is still a big issue. Winning teams will be able to run all over them and keep this offense off of the field. And they have made an effort in free agency and the draft to help on this side of the ball. I just don't think they've raised their floor enough or added enough, like a significant amount of depth to kind of keep whatever potential improvement they make throughout the whole season. So this is the first team that I would say you can think about, like the playoffs. Like I would definitely write off the bottom 4 teams. Like if they prove me wrong, so be it. This Panthers team, there's an avenue. This offense could be good enough to outscore other offenses, even if you score more points than the opponent, right? So if your offense is just too good, that's your avenue. Do I see it happening? I would not have them at 28 if I saw it happening, but I will admit, there is an avenue. Up next at number 27, we have the New England Patriots. This team, we have one of the best futures in the NFL here. I love their head coach hire in Mike Vrabel. They have a star young quarterback in Drake May entering year 2. They have injected talent on the offensive side of the ball. Big free agent signings on defense like Carlton Davis, Milton Williams. They hope to bring a high level of play and physicality to establish that Mike Vrabel defensive attitude. They still have some holes, but I do think these additions with Vrabel's coaching could help this defense reach a top 10 status if healthy. Offensively, additions like rookie running back Travion Henderson to pair with Ramondre Stevenson as a sort of thunder and lightning. Wide receiver Kyle Williams to pair with a veteran that they added, Stephon Diggs, who they just signed. Hopefully, this can add some explosiveness to a cast of weapons that was the worst in the league last year, genuinely. So that's just the thing, though, between the offensive line, which really isn't that great. They did draft Will Campbell, so they might have a left tackle now who can lock it down for Drake May's future, but it's the whole rest of the line too, right? So you've added the weapons, you did add a left tackle, but is that enough? I don't know. We do have Josh McDaniels calling plays, and hopefully he can elevate the offense and sort of figure out how to distribute the touches amongst these weapons. And another good thing is they have the easiest schedule in the NFL, so it's either them or the 49ers. So there's a chance they could slip into the playoffs based off of that. That's probably more so why I have them here, is because of the schedule. But I kind of don't really see them finishing like much higher than a playoff hopeful, like going into next year. It's just because if they get into the playoffs, there's gonna be some credit withheld from them because of that schedule. So I think you want to delay like any potential hype around this team like midway through the season, like, oh my god, they're so amazing, because we saw that with the Commanders last year. They had a really easy schedule, but I was holding off until the playoffs, and then even then some people have questions about how they won some of those games. So that's my number 27 team, the New England Patriots. At number 26, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars, another really exciting team, a brand new regime with the goal of maximizing their struggling first overall pick quarterback Trevor Lawrence. And they just might have done that, trading up to draft Heisman winner Travis Hunter to pair with Brian Thomas Jr., who had an elite rookie year as a wide receiver. So now you have an amazing young wide receiver duo, and Travis Hunter can also contribute on the defensive side of the ball. My guess is he probably plays mostly offense and gets in there on some nickel packages or something like that. And in addition to all of this, they have hired a new head coach, Liam Cohen of the Buccaneers last year. He was their offensive coordinator. He's from the sort of Shanahan, McVay kind of tree. He had Baker Mayfield throwing 41 touchdowns last year. That offensive line for the Bucs is definitely a lot better than this Jaguars offensive line. So the run game and just kind of the whole offense is probably not going to reach that status, but it's obviously looking much better than last year. The defense has some playmakers, like the edge duo of Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker, but has really struggled to reach any great status over the years. This is a really big year for Trevor Lawrence. They should be able to earn some wins and stay alive much longer than usual, despite the offensive line not being the greatest and the defense being somewhat inconsistent. You've got Travis Hunter now. You've got Brian Thomas Jr. You've got Liam Cohen calling plays. You don't have the worst O-line in the league. You're a first overall pick. It's time to show up Trevor Lawrence. It's now or never in 2026. Moving on to our next team. Another fun team to talk about. We have the Miami Dolphins landing in the volatile tier. They might be the most talented team in this whole tier, but also the most fragile on both sides of the ball too. Time and time again, we've seen this team lose players for the whole season to the point where I actually do feel the need to rank them down here, because if this team did not have any injury concerns, they would definitely be in the playoff hopefuls tier for sure. Because on paper isn't all that matters. You gotta be able to. You're not supposed to predict injuries, but when you have a situation like the Dolphins, obviously you have to consider it. So for the start of the season, I expect them to far outperform this ranking, so I will hesitate to move them up, because this is sort of like down the line projection. On one hand, this is about, the start of the season, but this is also about who I think is going to win the Super Bowl. So you got to kind of find a balance there. I think they're going to outperform this early on. Obviously, Achane at running back, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, still a top 5 wide receiver duo. I think Tyreek basically just has to show up, and that's going to remain true. I get he's being really, really strange right now. And with Tua on the field and all of that, this Dolphins offense can really be elite. So, but he has to stay healthy. Tyreek has to stay healthy. Achane has to stay healthy. Waddle has to stay healthy. All of them have had issues. And then that's not even to mention this offensive line that's already not great also can suffer injuries and get even worse. Part of the reason I think nobody could run this offense besides Tua last year is because they can't think fast enough for how fast the pass rush is coming at them. They cannot process the defense. Like, the system is complicated, sure, but they know what they're doing. It's just they don't have the time to do it, right? And Tua's just, he's got it down. So got to give some credit to Tua. I know people give him a lot of crap, but honestly, I think he proved last year something, right? Nobody else can really just do this off the bench. It's not that easy. So the identity of this team is well known. But if Mike McDaniel can have a better year coaching, it might be time to rethink some of the pieces of this organization, starting at quarterback and head coach, and just kind of like this whole plan of theirs. I still have zero hope for January if they do get there. So volatile team for sure in the Miami Dolphins, landing at 25. At number 24, we have the Seattle Seahawks. This offseason, they traded away quarterback Geno Smith, who they've been rolling with for 3 years since they lost Russ. And they followed it up by signing Sam Darnold in free agency. So where I'm going with this is, I think ultimately, if there's a team in the league this year that's going to have an amazing defense and a bad offense, I think it's going to be this team. I think it's going to be the Seahawks team. I mean, offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak is good. He's a good offensive coordinator. We saw that last year. But, I think operating with just Sam Darnold behind this interior offensive line that was so bad and has been terrible for years. It has not shown signs of changing. They did draft interior lineman Greg Zabel. I think he's going to play guard. So that should help. But Darnold behind this Vikings offense last year, we saw him collapse against a Lions defense that had 21 players on IR. just because they were able to scheme up some interior rush through stunts and things of that nature. And the offense for the Vikings completely fell apart. So if that happened in Minnesota, the most QB friendly probably, team in the league besides maybe the Eagles, then what's going to happen here in Seattle? I just really don't have a good feeling about this offense. But this defense, Mike Mack is a great defensive head coach. Year 2 is really exciting. This defense really turned it on in the back half of last year. And I think they could consistently be a top 10 unit for this entire year. But that's all I think this team really has going for it. You also trade away DK Metcalf, right? You move on from Tyler Lockett. JSN's your wide receiver 1 now, and then you sign Cooper Kupp, who plays the same role, to be your 2, who also has a lot of trouble staying healthy. But, I guess I respect it, but I don't know. It's just this whole offensive overhaul has got me very, very nervous. But the defense is looking really, really strong with Mike Mack. Now, like I've kind of already explained this, but I'm just going to quickly summarize it. I think trading Geno Smith was a mistake, more so because of how they've replaced him. He kept the Seahawks in games and played really well behind a bottom 5 pass blocking offensive line. And then they gave a free agent contract to Sam Darnold, who had a career resurgence, but like I said, he proved to us that the floor is still just as ugly. And Geno, like I said, he faced this interior rush, and we know he looks still pretty good dealing with that. So it's a huge chance to take on Sam Darnold. And the cherry on top, like I said, is just moving on from DK and Lockett to just trust JSN with Cooper Kupp, to develop chemistry with Sam Darnold, where it might be kind of chaotic behind this line. I know their whole plan is going to be to run the ball and get Kupp and JSN on play action, but and that should mitigate some of the blocking, but I don't have a good feeling about it. I really want to put them lower than this, but I know I shouldn't because that defense is just too good. Moving on to our next team, number 23, we have the Las Vegas Raiders. This team, speaking of Geno Smith, the Raiders are back. They trade for Geno Smith, the best quarterback they have had in a very long time. And I love that they did this and added Pete Carroll, 73-year-old head coach. Establishing a whole new culture here. And now the whole concept of Brock Bowers and Ashton Genty on the same offense is just fascinating for me to see too. I cannot wait to watch them and how they go about using those two. Wide receiver wise, they signed Amari Cooper. They also traded for Kenny Pickett as a backup, so you got some decent insurance, kind of like a Gardner Minshew level guy. And Jacoby Myers in the slot, and then Jack Beck on the outside as a perimeter wide receiver, but also can kind of play in the slot. I really, really like what this Raiders team is doing. Now, the offensive line isn't amazing, but it's definitely not an issue. I would definitely say it's better than the Seahawks, Dolphins, Jaguars, Patriots, and Panthers offensive lines. They have Genty to carry the run game behind that. Defensively, they were able to re-sign Max Crosby. I get they don't have a corner that people have a lot of confidence in starting, but ultimately I just see a lot of improvement, and I feel like this is one of those teams that some of those weaknesses that they have could have been influenced by the fact that they have such a terrible offense, right? Or they were having a bad season, and guys kind of mail it for the rest of the season. I think this team is going to look a lot better this year, and like I said, they've got issues, but on defense they were able to move on from Christian Wilkins. And I think Max Crosby can clutch up a couple sacks in tight game situations to kind of help get some wins from the defensive side, so the offense doesn't have to do anything. I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs, but I think this team is going to be pretty good. This is definitely one of my sleeper teams this year. Up next at number 22, we have the Atlanta Falcons entering the full year 1 of Michael Penix. And it's a pretty similar theme with this Falcons team, except it's the young quarterback. They have a young, exciting offense with first-round picks at every position. Quarterback Michael Penix, first-round pick. Bijan Robinson, top 10 pick at running back. Drake London, I'm pretty sure was a top 10 pick. Kyle Pitts was the 4th overall pick. I know how most of you feel about Kyle Pitts, but it's just obviously that all paired with a great offensive line, even though they still did lose Drew Dahlman, there's hopes to have, with a top 10 offensive line still, a potentially top 10 offense. I mean, what's not to like with what you got here? Penix looked good last year. He did play against some really bad defenses, but ultimately I feel really, really good about what he could, potentially, break out as this year with this offense. Now the coaching, Raheem Morris, on defense, that's where a lot of these issues sort of start. This Falcons defense is really devoid of a lot of talent, but they did do something about that this draft, drafting Jalen Walker and then trading up for James Pierce Jr. So they nabbed 2 edge rushers in the draft. I mean, you had to give up like next year's first round pick to move up for Pierce, but like, you solve that problem immediately, and then you might have a new set of problems next year, and it's probably not going to be edge. So my point is, the defense does not look too hot. This offense looks hot. We got some coaches on the hot seat, a young team. They're not going to scapegoat Penix. So it really just, this team could go a lot of different ways, but it's good for them that they play in the NFC South. So they do have an easier schedule. And with the Saints and the Panthers, they should be able to win 3 of those games between the 4 that would happen. And then they competed with the Bucs. Somehow they matched up well with them last year. So there's definitely hope for this team. Definitely belong in the volatile tier. Very excited to see what this offense looks like this year. Up next, we have the Indianapolis Colts, a team very similarly constructed to the Falcons in the sense that they have a top 10 offensive line. They have a great running back. They don't have as talented wide receivers. I forgot to mention Darnell Mooney, by the way, for the Falcons. But they do have a collection of wide receivers and playmakers. And what has been the assumption over the years is that they've just been missing a quarterback. Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson have been duking it out and squaring off. And this has to be the strangest quarterback battle of all time. 2 guys who are pretty talented in different ways, yet show some of the clumsiest plays we've ever seen from such specimens that they are. Richardson's only 23, and he's still got plenty of time. But I would expect 28-year-old veteran Daniel Jones to hold on to this job for most of the year. Boasting weapons, like I said, like JT. Also, they drafted Tyler Warren in the first round. They have a solid receiver core with Pittman, Downs, and Alec Pierce. Add Mitchell as well. He could break out this year. Good offensive line. Shane Steichen is a great head coach. Great offensive line calling plays. So whoever can manage not to screw this up just might revive their career between Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson. I think there's a chance that maybe they do move on from Anthony Richardson after this season if Daniel Jones really works out well enough, but I kind of doubt it. I think this is going to be going on for a while. Defensively, this team was horrible at tackling last year. They had their moments, but it really kept them from winning games. Additions like Charvarius Ward at corner and safety Cam Bynum could be a really good solution to that problem, at least in the back end for tackling. And overall, I just feel like this team is in a division that is not really up for grabs, but it's only really the Texans standing in your way. And they've tended to play them close over the years, so they could give the Texans some fits this year, potentially steal the division. I don't see it happening, or else I wouldn't have them here, but I'll definitely acknowledge the potential for it. And then finally, finishing off the volatile tier, some of you might have been wondering where this team is, and it is the New York Giants. Fair thing to point out. I'm a Giants fan, okay? I projected this team to have 7 wins last year, and I was very wrong. I'm again projecting this team to have 7 wins. So I have leveled out, okay? Because this team is far improved from what it used to be. I do have a whole season preview that you should go watch if you want more about the Giants and why I have them here. But in summary, here's how I see it. It's a very similar team to the Seahawks, a very loaded defense with a completely unproven offense. And if that's the case, why are they ranked higher? Firstly, I think despite the clear advantage that they have in defensive coaching, I think our defense has far more talent than they do, especially in the trenches, whereas they sort of excel in the secondary. I would rather excel in the trenches. The Giants have gone in also to address the secondary in free agency, signing Paulson Adebo, who's not some kind of like stud, but he's a solid starting corner, and we needed that. Safety Javon Holland is an all-pro level safety. That's the potential he has, and we got him on a nice cheap deal, meaning none of the former draft picks who are starting will be number ones, if that makes any sense. Nubin is now the Robin to Javon Holland's Batman. Deonte Banks is now the Robin to Paulson Adebo's Batman, at least for those respective positions. Now, Adebo's probably more of a Nightwing than a Batman, but you get my point. So don't get me started on this defensive line, okay? It looks like it's going to be the best defensive line in the NFL by a long shot, honestly, in my opinion. I don't think anyone has like a group of two guys with the potential of Dexter Lawrence and Abdul Carter, and then establish that Brian Burns is already like a low-end one rusher, I would say. Like a low-end one is definitely fair for him. And then Kayvon as like a rotational guy, or you could get all these guys on the field. Now, Darius Alexander has been disappointing, third-round defensive tackle. He's been disappointing throughout the preseason and camp, but he was dealing with an injury. Maybe he gets going by the end of the season. But offensively, this team, so unproven. And without Andrew Thomas, this offensive line might be the worst in football. But Evan Neal at guard, I was going to say it could change that. It's not looking too hot right now. But we do have an alpha wide receiver in Neighbors. That's something we haven't had for a long time. We got a running back duo in Scat and Tracy. Singletary is okay depth. Theo Johnson at tight end. We could have a breakout from him. It looks like they want to use him a lot based on the preseason. And then the rest of the wide receivers, Wandale, Slayton, and Hyatt, will really just be a third to fifth priority target in this offense, because I think they're going to use the running backs and tight ends a lot more. The Giants have never had a deeper quarterback room in the past few years, and they look to avoid everything that failed them last year. It looks like they're going to try to avoid that. The only thing that is still kind of shady is the offensive line, but we're not going to have bad QB play with Russ, Jameis, and Dart as the third string. Like, it's going to be much better than Daniel Jones and what we were rolling out last year. Ultimately, I think this is going to be one of the surprise teams too this year. Everyone's really down on them because of the schedule, which is totally fair. But we've been dealing with this schedule thing like the past 3 years. So it's honestly just a constant to me that it's relative, right? Because if we had a tough schedule the past 3 years, right, and we got better, we should have a better record this year. I don't think that's very complicated to say. It's just how much better are they going to be? It's supposed to be the hardest schedule in the league. So maybe 7 wins. Maybe it doesn't happen, but I think they will be so competitive in all of those games that I think people are going to respect them and have them higher up on lists like this. So also fair to mention, they lost 8 games by 1 score last year. So if you think they were so bad, it really wasn't like, they were getting blown out every week. Some of these other teams, we were losing in more heartbreaking fashion. Okay, so I think the difference at QB will be enough to win 4 more of those games, right? Just 4 more, just half of them. That's what we need. So that's what I see for the Giants. Call me biased, whatever you want. I got them at 20. They are not in the playoff hopefuls tier, so you got to give me that. You know who is in the playoff hopefuls tier? A team that the Giants are breathing down their neck. The Dallas Cowboys. What are they doing? I mean, I had a whole write-up for them and everything, but I might just go on a full rant for this, okay? I just released a short on this, and I have a whole video actually on Dak Prescott that you guys all should go watch, where I talk about this organization and how they have failed Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and the offensive weapons and offensive linemen that have come through. Any great player who's come through this organization has been failed by this management. How do you let Micah Parsons slip through your hands? You do not. The players like that do not grow on trees. You were lucky to be able to draft him where you were, right? Because the Giants moved down, the Eagles moved up and sniped the Giants. The Giants moved down. Parsons is just sitting there for you. He could have been a Giant this whole time. But ultimately, you drag your feet on this contract. You let the Browns beat you to it, and they signed Myles Garrett. You should have had him signed before the Jamar Chase contract, honestly, because that pushed up Garrett's contract, and obviously Garrett's pushed up Parsons' contract. I don't know what he was asking for. I don't know all the details, but they needed him so bad. Now, you do get 2 first-round picks and Kenny Clark back. Kenny Clark at a position of need. The run defense, that's the weakness for this team. That's what it was before they traded Parsons. That's still probably what it is, because just Kenny Clark is not enough to solve, like, the linebackers, the edge rushers being small, the secondary not tackling well. And these first-round picks they have are coming from the Packers, who are going to be in probably the conference championship, most likely, after trading for Parsons, if not the Super Bowl. So congratulations, you traded for 2 28th overall picks and Kenny Clark. And those first round picks are no guarantees. We see like half the first round picks every year get missed on. So if we assume that, okay, you get a 28th overall player who works out and Kenny Clark, who's 29 years old. Micah's 26. So I had this team at 14 before this trade happened. I didn't even move them down that much. I moved them down 5 spots. I feel like it should be more. But still, this offense is still going to be very good. They did trade for Pickens, which I liked very, very much. That's sort of an all-in move. And the trade you just did is like a rebuilding move. So it's like conflicting, goals there. But yeah, this offense is going to be great. I actually do believe this offensive line rebuild that they're doing, I think they're going to pull it off. They've done it many times in the past. They were very good and well known for their ability to draft and develop linemen, so I believe in them there. So if the offensive line is going to be good, you got Dax, CD, and Pickens. That's a really good passing game right there. Jake Ferguson 2, Jalen Tolbert as a 3. That's all great. The run game, Jaden Blue battling it out as the receiving back. Miles Sanders and Javonte Williams. One of them is supposed to be the starter. I really like Phil Maffa, the big power back guy they have, but he's on the IR now. So maybe you don't have a difference maker at running back, but this passing game, this is how they've been great on offense anyway over the past few years. So I see this passing offense being very good, but based on everything I just said, the Cowboys, I think definitely the right spot for them is at the bottom of the playoff hopefuls tier. Like, they can still make it, but I don't feel great about that trade. I think that was a bad trade. It's going to get looked back on as a huge mistake. You're taking on a lot of uncertainty in exchange for Micah Parsons. It's a huge gamble. Anyway, let's move on to our next team. At number 18, this team moved up 1 spot from where I originally had them, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Oh boy, this is a weird one. I was so wrong about the Jets last year. So wrong that I knew I had to think carefully about this one, and that I have. For the changes the Steelers made on defense in the secondary and on offense with Rodgers, just seems like they really are adding veterans to seemingly go for it and try to win the Super Bowl. All right? How possible is that? Well, unless Arthur Smith can make the most out of 2024 first-round pick tackle Troy Fautanu making his debut, as he missed all last season with an injury, along with replacing Najee Harris with third-round rookie Caleb Johnson, who could be the workhorse running back, doing all that to establish a great running game with Arthur Smith's play calling that Aaron Rodgers can sort of pivot off of with play action and provide some explosiveness for the offense, because we know that's what they're going to lack. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of assumptions. It's pretty far out there. The Steelers would have to get really lucky, in my mind, to get past the divisional round this year. And I have them down here until they prove that they can even make the playoffs. I think, the downside could be pretty bad. I mean, DK Metcalf might be less aggravating than George Pickens as a wide receiver, but I don't really understand why you would trade for DK, sign him that huge deal, and then trade away Pickens. It seemed like, Pickens and DK, with Aaron Rodgers and all the defensive additions, I get one of those were made by trading Minkah Fitzpatrick, or, kind of making up room, by not having to sort of pay or deal with Pickens. So I get it, but ultimately, I don't love this offense. I mean, Rodgers didn't look great last year. I think he'll look better this year. I do. This Steelers team had Russell Wilson playing better. I think they could do it with Aaron Rodgers too. Another year away from the Achilles. So I think he's going to be okay. It's just I don't think he's going to be able to elevate them in those important moments. They're going to win games, right? But I think their ceiling is much lower than what their record is going to show. So perhaps the additions they made were all necessary if they're going to go for it. But the question is, if it doesn't work out, what's the future after this? It's really digging yourself into a deeper and deeper hole every year that you try to commit to this and you don't try to sort of reset. But anyway, our number 18 team, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Up next, we have the Chicago Bears, my number 17 team. They're in a similar position to last year, except they've gone all out to replace and fix all their scapegoats. Matt Eberflus is a terrible head coach. Okay, he's gone. We hired Ben Johnson, the best coach on the market, an offensive guy who can develop Caleb as well. The offensive line, they held everything back. Well, they reshaped and rebuilt pretty much the entire offensive line in one offseason. So why the hesitation? Shouldn't they be a playoff team? On paper, maybe. And I also wrote this before I found out about the Parsons trade, but this really just amplifies it. When you zoom out and you realize the Vikings, Packers, and Lions are all still well ahead of them in most regards. Like, I don't care that J.J. McCarthy hasn't played yet. The Vikings are a proven elite roster and system that won 14 games with Sam Darnold. I'm sure they'll be great. The Packers, they're not going anywhere, and they added Parsons. They might be the best team in the division now. The Lions won 15 games, finishing the year with 21 players on IR. So we didn't even see the ceiling of the Lions last year, of the Packers. This Vikings team should be able to repeat what they just did. And even though the Lions lost two great coordinators, Dan Campbell should be trusted at this point to get, a lot of that back out of these players and, hire the right guys. So with 6 potential losses, holding this team back, although I think they're going to play outside of the division, I just think it's not really their time yet. Packers are really going for it. The Lions are still going for it. The Vikings kind of hitting their stride. I mean, theoretically, by QB, the Bears are 1 year ahead of the Vikings. McCarthy could not play last year, but I just think as a team, obviously the Vikings are far ahead of the Bears. And what's more important? The team. The team is more important than the quarterback. So I think it's going to be a promising year. I think they'll be good. They'll be somewhat around average, but those losses are mostly going to come from this division, and it's going to be painful, but the Bears should feel a lot better about this season. I just realized how long this video is getting, so we are going to try our best to keep flying through this. Up next, number 16, middle of the pack of the NFL. In the playoff hopefuls here, we have the Arizona Cardinals. They're the definition of this middle of the pack team, in my eyes. They really didn't lose anything, and they get a ton of players back on defense. This team was playing at a really high level early on in the season, but after the Commanders blowout, some reality set in, and then the losing streak late, fueled by bad defense and offense late in the season, that's, kind of how things went wrong last year. But the Cardinals, however, get a free defensive overhaul in the form of players returning from injury. Like the Lions get, however many players back, the Cardinals are getting almost the entire defensive line back, as they had starters and depth guys injured last year. Pair that with the offseason additions, the Cardinals will be starting a brand new defensive line this season. Something they need greatly to stop the many great run games in the NFC. The 49ers, the Rams, the Seahawks are going to try to do it. The Eagles, the Commanders, the Packers, the Lions, maybe the Vikings this year with a new offensive line that they've overhauled. The Buccaneers, the Panthers, the Falcons, all good offensive lines and running backs. In the NFC, it is so important to be able to stop the run because you're going to just get rolled in the playoffs if you can't. They catch a bit of a break with the AFC South and their schedule this year, so the path to the playoffs isn't too difficult. They have Jonathan Gannon, who I think has proven to be a good head coach at this point, how this team's, played and improved over each season. He should be able to have them play complementary football in all of these dome games that they play this year, which they play the most of in the NFL. Marvin Harrison Jr.'s connection with Kyler Murray is going to be critical to how far this team can go and how consistently they can play in the playoffs and beat really good teams. Like, when they were hot, Kyler with DeAndre Hopkins, that year that they started 8-1, that offense was really, really hard to stop. So it needs to be something like that connection in order for the Cardinals to hit their ceiling. But the running game, the defense, this team could have a Commanders-like season, except we expect way more than we expected from the Commanders year one. So I'm not saying they're going to go to the NFC Championship, but I do think they could actually get into the playoffs and do some damage. So Cardinals are ranked at 16. Up next, in the tier list, in the playoff hopefuls tier, we have in the division the San Francisco 49ers. This team was so bad last year, Scooter. Why do you have them here? Well, I'll tell you why. Like the Vikings, I have a lot of trust in this team and Kyle Shanahan to figure things out. Similar to the Lions last year, this team was in the NFC Championship the year before, and even the Super Bowl the year before, even the Super Bowl that year, but fell even further from grace than the Lions did due to more injuries and also having, more holes, that already existed on their roster. Then getting hit with those injuries really just crumbles the whole system. And it was just really hard for them to recover once that happened halfway through the season. This team has cleaned house. They've reset, and they have everyone back but Ayuk. is going to come back like halfway through the season. Jennings is in a contract situation and sort of like an injury thing too, which is concerning. But overall, I think, CMC, he's healthy right now. This offense is going to be dangerous having him back. Ricky Pearsall also is going to be the wide receiver one. I think he's talented. I think he's going to do well. George Kittle, obviously the best tight end in the NFL today. So, they've got a lot more than you think. Trent Williams also is not going anywhere. Defensively is where I have more questions. Some of the core pieces remain, but the time and time again, this team has failed to acquire defensive tackles and another edge guy to pair with Bosa. And this team has attempted to kill two birds with one stone, taking a freak edge rusher out of Georgia, Michael Williams, who can sort of play that 4-eye. You could probably line him up at 3-tech if you wanted to and really move him around the defensive line, but he's really, really raw, but he looks really good so far, and he gets to learn under Robert Saleh and Nick Bosa. I think that's a recipe for success right there. So his contribution against the run also right away is going to be pretty immediate. I think Robert Saleh is definitely going to know how to use him. I think, like I said, a big key to this is Robert Saleh. Him returning as defensive coordinator, who might be a top 5 defensive coordinator in the league when that's what he's doing. I get, you could say what you want about him as a head coach, but if all he has to worry about is the defense, he's great. Along with the other pieces they've added, I just think there are enough upgrades like Christian McCaffrey, Saleh coming back to this team. They should have a fair shake to returning to the playoffs. And if they do, I think they actually get hot and they make it pretty far due to their experience, the way their roster is built to win playoff games. They just got to get there and kind of survive the early part of the season where they're figuring it out. Up next, we got the LA Chargers at number 14, where the Dallas Cowboys were. It's so bad with this team. It's so bad. I was finally warming up to this potentially being like maybe a year where they could be one of those like formidable playoff teams that compete in the divisional round against the Bills, the Ravens, or the Chiefs. The offensive line looked really good. Omarion Hampton is awesome, and they added him, so Greg Roman has his running back. More wide receiver help. Year 2 of the defense. Then Rashawn Slater, left tackle. Probably the best player they have on offense. Tears his Achilles. At least, it's better it happens early in the season. He should have a promising window to return strong next year. And the Chargers themselves have the preseason to sort of prepare and adjust to this dramatic change. But realistically, I just don't feel like teams like this go very far, that lose one of their best players. When they get to the wild card again, will Justin Herbert, be under too much pressure? Will the structure of the offense once again collapse, and we'd be fed the same old story of bad circumstances or bad luck for Justin Herbert? Or do we go into the season hoping to just see more growth at other positions and not really getting all amped up for like an AFC championship or something like that? The interior offensive line still needs to make strides. The offensive weapons in Trey Harris and Keith Lambert-Smith and Omarion Hampton, and an improved defense with third-round rookie Jamari Caldwell. This team would need some extreme breakouts from these rookies and other young players in order to make up for the loss of Rashawn Slater and reach the same ceiling that we expected them to have before. The great filter of the Bills, Ravens, and Chiefs in the divisional round, I think, is going to hold up against this Chargers team. I think I accidentally put the Rams there. So be it. We got to fix now. And then finally, at number 13, we have the Minnesota Vikings. This team at number 13, like I said, the 49ers, I have a ton of confidence in this staff that they can keep it rolling. They've transitioned from Kirk Cousins to Sam Darnold and made it look like a good idea. Reviving his career with just a casual 35-touchdown season, Brian Flores might be the best defensive coordinator in the league, similar to Robert Saleh. Tried out head coaching, got let go, went back to being a DC. He's one of the best in the league at it. And last year, the way he had this defense playing for most of the year was amazing. And now they add upgrades like Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave in the interior. That's going to be nasty. It's year 2 of Dallas Turner on the edge, and that should spark because of the improvements on the interior, feed him some more opportunities. They also added to the secondary in Isaiah Rodgers. And this isn't a Vikings season preview, so I'll hold it there because offensively, they add Ryan Kelly and Will Fries, 2 huge additions to the interior of the offensive line that let Sam Darnold down last year. And then also, they picked Donovan Jackson in the first round. So, all this help in the trenches on both sides of the ball. I love this. And then they also add Jordan Mason as a power complement to Aaron Jones so that you don't have to give him 20 carries a game. Awesome. This entire roster is complete. One of the best in football, probably top 3. The only question is J.J. McCarthy good at football? He has not played a snap yet in the regular season of the NFL. And I think there is every sign, situationally, just points to greatness for J.J. McCarthy. And it's going to be like when he was at Michigan. He's going to have the run game. He's going to have even better wide receivers relative to what he was working with there. An amazing defense. And he will be able to play in his script that he prefers and under the guidance and coaching of Kevin O'Connell, who's really going to be leading the charge of that offense anyway. I think it's going to be pretty easy for him. Honestly, if he had already played last year and like looked how I'm talking about him right now, this team would be in the top 10. It's just, I have to have some kind of like uncertainty attached to him not playing yet. So I guess it is possible they could miss the playoffs and have a bad season and maybe only have like 7 or 8 wins. I think it's far more likely that they once again win like 12 or 13 games with this team. It's just, pretty wide range of outcomes with the, new quarterback stepping in to finally take over. So not all that much to say about the Vikings. They're an amazing team with a quarterback who hasn't played yet. So that's why they're there at 13. And then finally we get to move on to our playoff teams tier. And I'm starting things off with the Houston Texans. The Texans I have very mixed feelings about. But the number 12 should give you a good idea. And them being the first team, but the bottom team in the playoff teams tier. Defensively, they're going to be elite. D'Amico Ryans has done a great job coaching against these great teams in the AFC, like the Chiefs and the Bills and the Chargers in these big games. The pass rush duo of Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter may be the best in football outside of Pittsburgh. Derek Stingley Jr. is a top 3 cornerback in the league, and they're filled out top to bottom on this defense. But offensively, the weapons behind Nico Collins, they've been replaced again. They signed Christian Kirk, who's pretty good. He's a veteran, but he's still pretty good. And then they drafted the Iowa State wide receivers in Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. Mixon is definitely going to miss significant time to start the year and probably will not come back healthy, so that definitely hurts. But this is where I have the questions. The offensive line. I have major questions here. Now, they claimed it was because of locker room issues, and that's why they did this, but they traded away their best offensive lineman, by far, one of the best in the NFL, Laramie Tunsil. They traded him to the Commanders for some draft capital, pretty much, and I was shocked. I would assume the most untouchable person on the Texans roster last year would have been Laramie Tunsil because of how bad the line was and how bad they needed him there. But I guess what they're sort of insinuating with this trade is that the locker room issues were so bad that it is literally more worth it for us to get a couple draft picks, reload this offensive line with some depth and some potential starters, and just try again without him. This could be the worst offensive line in football. Really. So it kind of scares me having him here at 12. But they've been kind of dealing with it the past 2 years. So at the same time, I'm kind of giving CJ Stroud some credit for proven that he can kind of put up with that, even though some people say it was a sophomore slump last year. No, the offensive line was horrible. So although I have major questions there, this team does still have that elite defense, CJ Stroud, and a good coaching staff. And let me just say, those locker room issues better have been horrific, because if they can improve moving on from him, I would be shocked. This team's exciting. The defense is really going to win them a lot of games. They can play cohesive, complementary football, but I see this team suffering the same fate as last year in the first or second round of the playoffs, getting beat up through the offensive line. Up next at number 11, we have the Cincinnati Bengals. I think this team is sort of similar to the Houston Texans, except they have a horrible defense, right? But I think their offensive line is much better than the Texans' offensive line. Now, the Bengals' offensive line isn't good, but it's kind of in that Raiders tier where I'd say it's projecting to not be an issue this year. And I also think Burrow is way better than CJ Stroud. Chase is better than Nico Collins, but not by as much. But T. Higgins is far better than whoever they have next up. Chase Brown, well, he's going to be better than Mixon because he's not in there, all right? And they also drafted Taj Brooks to potentially be a power complement. I really like this offense. I really, really, really like this offense. And they have everyone coming back through the whole season, right? So, and this team, when they get to the playoffs, even if the defense does suck, they get hot. They were playing at the end of last year. It was just too little too late. So I think my thinking is them all being signed already at the start of this offseason. at least figuring it out with T. Higgins pretty soon on. I get the Trey Hendrickson thing just got figured out. But I just think this offense is going to hit its stride a lot sooner in the season, and they're going to avoid a lot more losses because of that. I know the defense is terrible. Everyone's under contract now. Trey Hendrickson's back. At least they have him. First-round rookie Shamar Stewart, he signed. But the interior defensive line, the secondary, just leaves a lot to be desired. But defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo is gone. That could have been part of the issue, too. They replaced him with Notre Dame's Al Golden. Hopefully he can get more out of this unit. So I think they're always going to be a little squishy, but if they could just generate some turnovers, TFLs, sacks, Hendrickson's still back there, this team can be very dangerous again. And I think, like I said, with everyone on the important side of the ball being under contract for the start of the year, that should give them hope to break the early season woes curse that they can't seem to escape. Up next, my number 10 team in the NFL. In the playoff teams tier, we got the Denver Broncos. This team has a ton of potential heading into this season with the best overall defense in football. Year 2 of Sean Payton with quarterback Bo Nix. I think the Broncos and Bo Nix get overshadowed a lot because of what the Commanders and Jaden Daniels did last year. The Commanders made it all the way to the NFC Championship and they looked great. But I think the reality is, if you swap these conferences, there's a good chance we get the same outcome, meaning the Broncos would go to the NFC Championship and the Commanders would lose pretty bad to the Bills in the first game. Probably would have kept up a little bit more on offense, but they still definitely would have lost. And the Bills, to me, are a lot closer to the Eagles tier team. The Eagles tier of teams who blew out the Commanders, and the Broncos were playing at a very high level, especially at the end of last year. And if that hypothetical were true, we would be talking about Bo Nix as Offensive Rookie of the Year and predicting the Broncos to go to the Super Bowl. I'm not ready to go that far. I do believe there is something to take away from the disappointing playoff blowout, but this team has made upgrades on both sides of the ball and look to break out this year as an elite team in the AFC. Super excited for the Broncos this season and can't wait to see how they start the season. They're my number 10 team. Up next at number 9, team we just mentioned, the Washington Commanders. So because of that playoff blowout loss by the Broncos, I do feel somewhat obligated to give the Commanders this spot over them. Although the Broncos definitely had a harder regular season schedule and all that kind of stuff, it's just the Commanders are the ones who got all the credit for the unexpected breakouts last year between these two teams. But this team did also make a lot of improvements. We were talking about Laramie Tunsil getting traded before. Who profited? Who just got Laramie Tunsil for a cheap cost? It was the Commanders. This offensive line was kind of average before, kind of like the way I was talking about the Bengals offensive line. But now they get Laramie Tunsil, an elite left tackle. That's a huge improvement. They had a Deebo Samuel, who's going to be the number 2 behind Terry McLaurin, who they did get signed. By the way, I got a full video on the Commanders breaking down all last year, what they did this offseason, what to kind of expect for this year. But this is a good summary here, just seeing that I have them here at number 9. And then they also drafted Jalen Lane, a wide receiver who could be their number 3. And so this offense is looking very, very, very scary. Defensively, though, I would say I'm very worried about the loss of Jonathan Allen, who did sign with the Vikings. It's just Dan Quinn, as the defensive coordinator, was able to get a lot out of this team last year. I think a lot of it hinged on Jonathan Allen kind of being there, late in the season and for the playoffs. I know he got hurt in the middle of the season. But it's just going to be tough. They signed Javon Kinlaw, hoping that he's going to kind of play in that same role, and I just don't know. I don't know that that's going to work out for them the way that they think it will. And I think this defense could be a real problem. I actually see this team shaping up to be very similar to this Bengals team, except I think having a guy like Laramie Tunsil really sets them apart. And although I'm criticizing their defense, I still think it's definitely better. So overall, I think this is a fair spot for this team to not overreact and put them in Super Bowl contenders when they lost to every playoff team they played last regular season. That's what happened during the regular season. When they played those playoff teams, they lost to them. When their starting quarterback was in there. Beating Kenny Pickett on the Eagles does not count, okay? So that's why I have the Commanders here at 9. Very exciting, super fun team, but at the same time, you got to be a little real. And you got to admit what happened last year. So my number 9 team is the Commanders. Number 8, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buccaneers, to me, are a very underrated team in my eyes. They might start somewhat slow as Chris Godwin and Tristan Wirfs are returning from injuries, but I see that galvanizing the team when they come back. Playoff time, which it's actually supposed to be much sooner than that. They both come back. But by then, by the playoffs, they will have been playing for a couple weeks and warmed up and ready to go. No like nothing rusty to knock off as you're hitting your stride. Offensively, the emergence of Bucky Irving, drafting Emeka Egbuka, Mike Evans is still there. This offensive line that's borderline elite when Wirfs is in there, and Baker Mayfield, who just gets better every single season. While this is a great team, and some offensive coordinators who are great have left him, he's had a different one every year. But the Shanahan coaching tree is what keeps feeding him, and that's what he's got to get. Okay, with his next offensive coordinator. So I don't really see any reason to expect like major regression, like, oh, he's going to throw like 20 touchdowns. Like, yeah, he might not throw 41 again, but I think he should probably throw 30 touchdowns again. Defensively, Todd Bowles has done a great job with this unit. Even though they suffered injuries last year, they were still playing at a pretty high level come the playoffs, and now they add Hassan Reddick, who they hope can add some explosiveness to this rush and kind of work him in on some blitz packages. This team to me is just very well rounded, and they match up very, very well against a run-heavy NFC, and they should have teams nervous to play against them in the playoffs. So that's the Buccaneers at number 8. Number 7, we got the LA Rams. Now, this team is in a bit of a limbo right now because we don't really know if Matthew Stafford is healthy, but I'm going to assume he is for this case. I will also say what I think happens if he doesn't play, but assuming he does play, actually, let's just get right into it. The Rams are living in two worlds right now. The one where he misses week 1 and the one where he doesn't. We don't know what will happen yet, but I think Stafford's one of the toughest QBs in the league. If it's possible to play through it, he's going to. And maybe they do have a little bit of a slow start to the season, but that happened last year. And then they went 7-2 down the stretch and were the best playoff team last year who versed the Eagles. They gave them the best run for their money. So the defense surely surprised many like last year because they were expected to be a bottom 5 unit, and they played like a top 15 and even top 10 unit at times down the stretch with like the young defensive linemen of Braden Fisk and Jerry Verse, who they drafted in the first and second round. They were home run draft picks, and they have a disruptive pass rush, but their issue is that they still don't really have a lot of run defense. So that's something that they're going to need to develop throughout this season to compete with a team like the Eagles, or else you're just going to be totally outmatched by their offense. And on the other side of the ball, this team is sort of like the Cowboys in the way I described them on steroids. Elite coach, maybe the best in football in Sean McVay. It's either him or Andy Reid or Shanahan. The offensive line is already there. They have better running backs than the Cowboys. They have a veteran quarterback like Dak, who's established with his number one wide receiver, Puka, that's like CD. And now Pickens, you've added Devontae Adams. This could very well challenge Chase and Higgins as the best wide receiver duo in football. And if this offense gets going, they're going to be really, really, really hard to stop. If they get into the playoffs, they should be in the mix for the NFC Championship. But if Stafford misses, I don't see Jimmy Garoppolo taking this team to the NFC Championship. Absolutely not. It's kind of reminds me of like those 49ers teams, but I just think the defense is really hinging on the offense kind of consistently playing, and I don't think you're going to get that with Jimmy G, and I just think it sort of all falls apart, and they probably win like 6 games. If, let's just say, Stafford misses the whole year, yeah, I'm saying they win like 6 games. They'd be in the probably the rebuilding tier at that point, maybe volatile, bottom of volatile, if that's the case. Up next, my number 6 team, we have the Lions, and they are in the Super Bowl contenders tier. This Lions team have some people feeling very mixed. A lot of people, because of Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, their coordinators leaving, how bad they, blew it last year with the 1 seed. Obviously, it was a huge disappointment. And so it just doesn't really look really good. But, I would say, let me tell you, if you think they're going to regress, I disagree. Both coordinator hires that they did this offseason were in-house. They have a strong culture here and should be able to get similar coaching and play calling out of their in-house hires who have been here, are familiar with the organization and how they do things here. Roster-wise, offensively, there are some losses in the offensive line like Kevin Zeitler and Frank Ragnow. Once again, I think they're going to be able to replace it. That's just what they've done here in Detroit. We saw it last year with how they replaced the defensive players that all got hurt. The defense was still playing well until, the playoffs. So this is just what this team should be known for doing. And like I said about the offense, Jamison Williams looks like he could take another step as a wide receiver too. And then maybe athletic rookie Isaac Tesla can step up and be the number 3 for this team. And people should not forget that this defense is good. This is a good defense. They played really well until Aiden Hutchinson was hurt. And then following that, with all of the other 19 or 18 players going on IR on that side of the ball alone, this defense is getting all these guys back. So I would say that's probably more impactful than losing Aaron Glenn. I would much rather gain 19 players back than, keep my defensive coordinator. So I'm not really that concerned about the defense. The offense, it's going to be great again. Even though Ben Johnson's gone, they definitely had someone under him. Whoever they hired is definitely going to be ready to go. And they should be in line again to win the NFC North, except I wrote that part before the trade that I discussed earlier on in this video. And if they can stay healthy, they should be within reach of a Super Bowl. Let's move on to our next team, because I was just sort of insinuating at it. And that's the Green Bay Packers at number 5. This team is solid at every position. And their only real issue is that they don't really have like a lot of star power. That's what I initially wrote before the Micah Parsons trade. They were ranked 7 before in the playoff teams tier at the top. And I felt pretty good about that. And I was like, I just really can't put them in Super Bowl contenders. I had them going to the Super Bowl last year. I was super high on them. I was wrong, right? But they also did play well against the Eagles, and that was missing a lot of wide receivers to injury. So I don't think I was too far off. Now they trade for Micah Parsons. You get that superstar that you needed. Now they have a top 3 to 5 pass rush in the NFL and what should be a top 5 defense. Mix that with Matt LaFleur on offense, and Jordan Love and Matthew Golden added as a weapon on offense. Josh Jacobs running the ball the way he was last year, really carrying the offensive floor. This team is also still the youngest team in the NFL and definitely has that going for them, and all these players should be improving as this season goes on. We've been saying this for 3 years now that 2 or 3 years, 3 or 4 years, the Packers are going to be amazing. It's here. It's now. I want to put this team even higher. I just can't do it, right? Because this is all such new stuff, the Parsons trade, that I just can't. But let's keep talking about the other players, okay? For wide receiver, I mentioned they added Matthew Golden, first-round wide receiver. I have a lot of hope for him. I have a lot of stock in him in Dynasty and in Underdog and in Redraft. I think he is going to be their alpha wide receiver. Jaden Reed's going to be in the slot. Someone else is going to find, play that in that flex role. They also drafted Savion Williams, who's like a very athletic wide receiver. Looks like he could be like a Christian Watson replacement because he just can't stay healthy. And people forget that last year Jordan Love suffered a bad knee injury week one, and came back when he probably should have been out for like a month and a half or 2 months. He came back in like 3 games. And people have the gall to criticize him last year like that's some great sample or representation of who Jordan Love is. I don't agree, right? I think he is much closer to what we saw in the second half of the season prior, and he should improve a lot more 2 years later with everything he's been able to learn, all these additions on offense. I'm just really, really pumped about this Packers team. Also noteworthy that they did move on from Jair Alexander, cornerback, due to his injury history, and they hope their depth can step up as they've already kind of consistently had to do when he's gotten hurt. And this is the official opening of this team's Super Bowl window. They're young still, so they should start hitting their stride, and Parsons should help them and accelerate that process of them really becoming one of these elite teams that is going to stick around for 3 to 5 years, that outside of horrific amounts of injuries, they're just always going to be in the hunt for the NFC Championship. And this team right now is the highest rated NFC team I have outside of the Eagles. So I have them. It was the Lions before, and now I have the Packers as the best team to challenge the Eagles. So let that be known. Number 4, we got the Kansas City Chiefs. I struggle with this team. I really do, but I feel like this is the right spot for them. I don't buy into the idea that this team just got exposed and everything's going to be all different now. They lost Chris Jones in that Super Bowl. and the offensive line had some missing pieces, and that was the difference between that game being maybe a close loss. Like, I still think the Eagles probably would have won, but last time it was a close game, the Eagles kind of crumbled in that game script, and the Chiefs were the ones that were able to play well in it. But it was the difference between that and a total blowout, because Chris Jones is the best player on that defense by far, and when they lose him, that's a whole bunch of like nuanced assignments that he kind of helps, or attention that he draws that isn't there, that just allowed the Eagles to pretty much just, throw it all over the yard if they had to, but they actually pretty much just needed to run the ball in order to win. But yeah, their whole team played really, really well. And this Chiefs team looked so bad. But even though that is an excuse, they scraped by to go 15-2, and they just can't roll out Chris Jones, Travis Kelce, and this offensive line with all these guys at the age they are, and just pray they all stay healthy forever. Eventually, this team is going to have to inject some talent in the defense to make up for Chris Jones. Same thing with the offense and Kelce. He looked so bad last year. Maybe he can bounce back. He's all like engaged now and stuff, but I don't think he's ever getting any better, that's for sure. Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice each have their issues of their own. Rice with the suspension, Hollywood's injuries, and Worthy, I think, is sort of limited in his role. He's very small. Pacheco's fun, but just not great. It, puts a lot on Mahomes' shoulders for this to be the weapons he's working with, which is fine, but I think clearly they can do a lot better. Defensively, I think, they're screwed again if Chris Jones gets hurt, whereas the teams, further up this list are not quite as fragile. So that's kind of why I have the Chiefs at 4, because they still have my number one benefit of the doubt sort of factor. Thank you, that franchise guy, for that term, because that's a great term. I was always wondering, how the hell do I describe this feeling I have about this team? Yes, their benefit of the doubt is the highest in the NFL. So you'd be, all right, why aren't they 1? Well, because they're so fragile. That benefit of the doubt goes away if Chris Jones is hurt. It's a completely different game. Same thing if, I guess not even really if Travis Kelce goes down, but we haven't really seen that. It was basically he wasn't there, and the offense did not look great. They lost Pacheco, the run game. They couldn't figure that out. They were rolling out Kareem Hunt. In 2025, that's what they were doing. And he's still there. It's like they're really rolling out this same team. But so I won't rule out this team figuring it out this year. I'm not going to do that. I do think they have the offensive line figured out. Josh Simmons looks like a steal at the end of the first round. He's already playing. Pacheco was injured last year, so there's some hope there. So yeah, I'm not ruling out this team from the Super Bowl, but they just got to prove a little bit of something to me, that they've raised their ceiling, and that they can actually kind of expose teams with some talent on both sides of the ball outside of Chris Jones. Moving on to my next team. All right, so you guys are all looking here. We got the Bills, Eagles, and Ravens. All right, ooh, big surprise. All right, but what order am I going to put these teams in? The Bills are my number 3 team. I think they were better overall than the Chiefs last year. I really do, which is why I have them ahead of them. They really got screwed in that AFC Championship game. But what else is new? Perhaps year like 3-ish of Joe Brady and the weapons in this offense can be the year. For tight end Dalton Kincaid, to me, it's now or never in my eyes. For him to become like the receiving tight end we've always expected him to be, is now or never. Keon Coleman, he could break out this year. Reports out of camp are good, saying that he looks like he's, gaining a lot more separation. That's definitely something he needed to work on. Shakir's a great slot wide receiver. The team signed Josh Palmer, hoping he could serve as a bit of an alpha, which is a reach. Curtis Samuel is still here. Still not that impressed in like the whole wide receiver situation. One of Coleman or Palmer is going to need to break out in their roles. It's most likely going to be Keon if it does happen, but it's just not that likely, I wouldn't say. I do like the running backs. Ray Davis is a great compliment to James Cook, who is now under contract, so they have them all coming back. The offensive line is great. That's one of the best things this team has going for them. It might even be top 5. And obviously Josh Allen is an elite quarterback who carries this offense behind this great offensive line in a very similar way that the Chiefs have structured their team. Defensively, this team doesn't really have any superstars in my opinion, but many great players, much like the Eagles defense. Not a bad player at any position, but this team is weak at corner, and they hope that first-round pick, Maxwell Hairston, can have an impact there. And they did let go of Von Miller for the cheaper Joey Bosa. They drafted more depth at defensive tackle behind Ed Oliver with guys like Deion Walker. But overall, I think this defense and offense, I don't feel much has changed or is going to drastically improve. This team is looking for guys that can make a few plays for them in January, and that's not going to be here for a while, so it's tough with the Bills. But I feel like they've improved each year, but the outcome has just kind of been the same every year. The goal is just simple. Beat the Chiefs. Prove my ranking correct here. Prove to me that you can beat the Chiefs in the playoffs. Because if you can't, why should I ever put you number one in the NFL? Why am I even putting you ahead of the Chiefs, right? So you better prove me right this year, Bills. I'm rooting for you, I promise. Of course, I do not want the the Chiefs. I do not want them to keep beating you guys. I'm sick of it. But you're also going to have to potentially beat this team to get there and do that. The Baltimore Ravens, my number 2 team. To me, they're a step above the Bills, and I feel like it really is because they have a superstar outside of their quarterback in Derrick Henry. I think this offensive line could start playing at the level of that Bills offensive line in entering year 2 of developing, because they kind of did a bit of an overhaul the year before. But Derrick Henry, Lamar, and this offensive line alone can take over a game. And like Josh Allen, like him just doing it by himself is way too like unpredictable to rely on, in my opinion. Defensively, I think they're stronger than the Bills. Kyle Hamilton, he's kind of like Derrick Henry in the sense that he's their superstar on that side of the ball. He's great to cover mismatches like tight ends. He's a great tackler, and of course he can force turnovers too, forcing the ball out and, you know, getting interceptions, playing in that like sort of slot safety role. And then I just buy into the coaching a lot more. Really, the only argument for the Bills is that they won last year and that Lamar chokes harder than Josh Allen does, which may be true, but Lamar looked a lot better in that game with Henry and in year 2 of Todd Monken's offense. It gets really scary when you think he may have never really had coaching for a passing offense until Todd Monken. So this is like year 3 of him learning that. If that stuff was all very new, he should still be taking strides this year. So Zay Flowers was also out in that game versus the Bills. Rashad Bateman got injured in that game. There was, you know, that's not the full strength Ravens that played that Bills team. And the Ravens played terrible and still could have easily won if they avoided only their last mistake of the game. So, yeah, this team's ceiling is through the roof. That brand new offensive line from last year enters year 2 of gelling. Henry is an alien and shows no signs of regression. They just need Zay and Bateman to be out there. Even if there are better starters around the league, they're both still better than backups, kind of like Khalil Shakir is on the Bills. They just got to avoid choking and the bad luck with injuries. It's time for this team. This is the window. They got to have it now, and I know Ravens fans feel the same way. And then for finally, our last team is actually getting its own tier. And this tier is the inevitable tier. The Philadelphia Eagles. This team, as a Giants fan, it hurts me. It really does. But I've got a full video on Jalen Hurts talking about my views on him, why I think he's only top 10 and not top 5. And I got to give some credit to the Eagles, right? Especially if I'm going to hold that stance about Jalen Hurts, where I'm saying how amazing this team is and that he gets to be the quarterback for that. You know, it's got to tell you something, right? About, you know, what he could potentially do on other teams when you're kind of evaluating him. But ultimately, Hurts is a great leader. Hurts is a top 10 quarterback. That is plenty good enough with this team to get you right back to the Super Bowl year after year after year. 2 of the past 3 years in the Super Bowl. And now this is like sort of their prime. This is only year 1 of Saquon Barkley. I mean, like I said, many know me for my take on Jalen Hurts, but this team, I could just go on and on and on. They do lose Kellen Moore, but I think ultimately the offensive philosophy has been clear the past few years under Sirianni. Like, him and Jalen Hurts, like, this offense has always looked the same no matter whoever the coordinator is. I know maybe it was a little bad with Brian Johnson, but that was just because it was bland. It was the same philosophy. It's run the ball with Saquon and Jalen Hurts, punish defenses when they add another defender in the box, because now you have one-on-ones with AJ and Smitty. I know there's levels and nuances to it, but that's what's going on here. Goddard, also a top 8 tight end in the NFL, can catch and can block. The offensive line is the best in football, a generational offensive line. This elite offense, this is an elite offense in the NFL, the most elite. I would argue, just because of how unstoppable this run game looked at the end of last year. It's a bit one-dimensional, but that one dimension is just nearly impossible to stop. So who cares? Defensively, they lost some starters for sure, but this team has depth and new draft picks ready to go. This is the magic of Howie. It's also entering year 2 of Vic Fangio's scheme. The perfect complement to a running offense is a great defense. Key departures, they lost Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, 3 key defensive linemen, and then 2 key guys in the secondary, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who they've been without before, and then cornerback Darius Slay, who is really getting up there in age. So what do they do about this? They had Joshua Uche at the edge position, Adoree Jackson to replace Darius Slay, Andrew Mukuba at safety to replace Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, and Jacorian Bennett at corner also to kind of fill in for Darius Slay. But he's only going to have to be a 2 because you got DeJean in the slot and Quinion as the number 1. And then also, they get to basically just draft Jahad Campbell for free at linebacker, the best linebacker in the draft because he had injury concerns. And Zach Bond, pardon me, they have Zach Bond to kind of help grow and develop Jahad Campbell. They still got Nakobe Dean. I don't know if he's healthy yet, but he's going to be coming back at some point. And just this team's formula to win football games is the most elite in all of football. Of any group, position group in football, this offensive line is the best. It's better than any defensive line, any other offensive line, obviously. It's better than any core of wide receivers that you could have, any secondary that you could have, linebackers, even quarterback. I would rather have this Eagles offensive line than I would have, say, if I had 1 year, right? I'm not talking about starting a franchise. If I had to start making a team to win a Super Bowl this year, I would start by picking this Eagles offensive line. Give me some other quarterback other than Mahomes. There are a lot of great quarterbacks in the NFL. There's just not a lot of great teams, right? So you get a Brock Purdy behind this Eagles offensive line. I think he would be great. You get Tua behind this offensive line, Kyler, Bo Nix, Jaden. Really, I could make an argument for a lot of guys, but let's not play shoulda, woulda, coulda. This offensive line is the first thing I would pick. And if I got to include Saquon Barkley, then I would definitely pick it first. Because Saquon behind this offensive line with a competent passing game is unbelievably hard to stop. And the amount of attention that commands from the defenses, it really just allows Hurts to get the job done when it comes to passing and the play calling for Kellen Moore last year. So perhaps the Packers can now challenge them, adding Parsons to that defensive line. That is definitely interesting. They did lose Kenny Clark, though, so I think, kind of handling this interior, this Eagles offensive line, you might get they might run it up the middle quite a bit against you. Micah's not really a run defender, so that would help you get sacks against the passing game, make it really hard for them to pass. They were getting a lot of pressure, but maybe dropping some guys into coverage, more guys in the coverage because you're not blitzing as much, could be an issue for this Eagles team, but I think they're still better than the Packers for sure. This is what the best team in the NFL looks like. And they would need to see a ton of regression and injuries to miss the Super Bowl, lose it, or somehow miss the playoffs. We got a quick summary for you guys here. Number 32, we got the New Orleans Saints. Number 31, Cleveland Browns. Number 30, Jets. 29, the Titans. 28, Panthers. 27, Patriots. 26, Jaguars. 25, Dolphins. 24, Seahawks. 23, Raiders. 22, Falcons. 21, Colts. 20, the Giants. 19, the Cowboys, now without Micah Parsons. 18, the Pittsburgh Steelers. 17, the Bears. 16, middle of the pack, the Arizona Cardinals. 15, the 49ers. 14, the Chargers. 13, the Vikings. And then number 12 in our playoff teams tier, we got the Houston Texans. Number 11, the Bengals. Number 10, the Broncos, cracking the top 10. Number 9, the Commanders. Number 8, the Buccaneers. Number 7, the Rams. Number 6, the Lions in our Super Bowl contenders tier. Number 5, the Packers. Number 4, the Chiefs. Number 3, the Bills, and number 2, the Ravens, as my best shot to beat the Eagles. And then number 1, the Eagles. Are they inevitable this year? Thank you guys so much for watching my very first preseason power rankings video. I cannot wait to update you guys on a weekly basis with my weekly The Pocket Top 10 and tell you who I think my top 10 teams are. And maybe I'll even break it up into tiers just like this. And there's going to be lots of other stuff coming throughout the season, such as my best bets and Giants previews and reactions. All of this is going to be coming in shorts form. The reason I am doing that is so that I can take away some of that time and sort of make those long form videos for you guys just over a span of time with no real commitment to when the release date is. And I can just really let my imagination sort of run wild and really make it the way I think is best for the way I want it to look and the best for you guys. So stay tuned for all that type of stuff. Thanks for watching till the end. Whether you skipped right to the Eagles and you ended up here, or you really did watch straight through, I don't know, this is going to be well over an hour, that much of the video. But yeah, I very much appreciate all of you guys coming here watching. This is year 2 on YouTube. Had a very successful and awesome first year. Super grateful for everything, and all the subscribers, all the comments, all of the likes this off season, and all the support has just truly been, it's been heartwarming. Like really, like to put all the effort I put into some of these videos and to actually get the amount of feedback I've gotten has truly been amazing. This video is not going to have really much editing at all. I'll probably try to use like the auto cut, but other than that, it's just going to be up there. I just want to get my take out there for you guys. You can follow the weekly top 10 throughout the rest of the season. Thank you all again so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.